build from observations within the area by including regular sit spots in lessons. I think this will also be a great way to build routine at the beginning of the school year. There will be guest speakers, hopefully some community members, to talk about plants, culture, land, and like biodiversity related lessons. After the students have gathered a great deal of information, they'll be paired based on specific land interests to conduct even further research and add the information that we've all gathered as a class into their final projects. Based on the class sizes, there will be a maximum of 10 groups, and each group will have a specific area of study to associate with a location in the forest behind the school. Essentially, the end project is to install information billboards and for students to compile the information on their collage-like information board. So this can include like text and vocabulary they've learned, maps of the location, illustrations, their observations, and any pictures. The outdoor location for this project will take place in a forest area located behind the school property. The information I've gathered from the area so far is that there is a river that can be crossed by the train track that goes from the northeast side of the school over to the forest area. This track no longer has a train that travels along it, and crossing over into the forest would give the students a lot more space, quietness, and accessibility to the forest to conduct their land-based research. The forest area behind the school spreads north approximately 800 meters until it reaches the northmost border of Long Lake number 58 First Nation. I'm unsure exactly like how prominent any trails are in that area yet because I've yet to go there myself. If there are no trails whatsoever, then this project may have to be like slightly relocated or even this area further explored during the winter months, depending like how heavy the brush is in that area. So this is the area that I'm looking at here. McGizzy-Wazason Elementary School is right here. And then here's the train tracks that can be crossed over into this kind of forest area behind the school. But again, if this is like dangerous or inaccessible for whatever reason, this project could also take place on the shoreline on the school side of the land here. Here's another screenshot from Google Earth, Google Maps. So the school is located right here. Here's the rest of the community and a lot of the residential area. And then here is a field that is for the students. I think this is a soccer field here. And then sometimes students they can go back here for certain like outdoor lessons. So hopefully that's fairly easily accessible. But again, if not, we've got some areas on this side of the shore. The really exciting and interesting thing about Long Lake number 58 First Nation and their school is that they have their own history curriculum that they have developed, and each grade has in like specific topics that are covered. So I think it should be fairly easy to relate these topics to the land-based learning of this unit, and also to any of the additional stories that are told from elders or community members, or stories that are included in this history curriculum throughout the unit. So specifically, this first part up here is for the grade 5 topics from the history curriculum, and then down here is the grade 6 topics for the history curriculum, just so that you can see some of the interesting things that are included, which are actually like fairly heavy, but very like informative for these grades, which is awesome. Here are some other links that I've been looking at to begin designing this unit of study. So the Indigenous land-based learning from ETFO includes many definitions that help clarify the intentions and language used in this proposal. So like the difference between place-based learning and Indigenous land-based learning. Here is a teacher resource for Indigenous seasons, specific to hearing what happens during those seasons for Ojibways. And then a video here for making observations in nature. Simply like some tips and things that I could incorporate in my specific lessons during that phase of the unit. So here's kind of how I've broken down this unit. I can see it taking anywhere between like 4 and 6 weeks to complete. Really as a project that isn't too rushed and is incorporated into like a lot of the daily lessons and learning. So part one is mainly focused on observing the land. So that's when students will go out regularly into their sit spots. Part two is lessons of the land. So where we'll be learning more specific lessons from any like guest speakers, elders, lessons from the history curriculum. And then part three is the actual making of the learning trail or story trail. So things I've considered for like these three phases of the entire unit. Part one, in this phase of the learning from the land unit, students will routinely make observations of the forest area behind the school. So the more observations gathered during this phase, the more knowledge and information from the land that students will have to add to their final phase, the actual making of the interpretive trail signs. The ideal amount of time for this, I think, is about 2 weeks. That way it gives students lots of opportunity to learn about like many techniques when making observations and to really get into a routine of being comfortable in one location and really building a relationship with that place. Even if we only get to go out for about 20 minutes each day, I think that this happening more regularly for shorter amounts of time is better than not enough for longer amounts of time. The actual activity is like students will be given their own drawstring backpack with writing and drawing materials to take out each session. Some activities will have a writing focus, some like a sketching, drawing, or even like painting focus. Some will be focused on listening, observing, so building up all of these skills so that students really get to know this spot really, really well. Some lessons will happen in the classroom. Some practice with this can happen just outside the school, behind the school, before we actually step off into the forest. Also, students will have lessons to help them identify like certain plants and animal species in the area, changes in nature, what to look for, and safety related lessons. By the end of the 2 weeks, students will have a collection of research they've gathered from their forest sit spots. Each student will have their own portfolio of work to use in part three of the overall unit, the project. So in phase two, or part two of this unit of study, Stories of the Land is what I've kind of called this part. Students will be learning, the learning will be centered around pre-existing stories from Long Lake Number 58 First Nation. Some of those stories may already exist within the cultural teachings, resources, and within the history curriculum specific to Long Lake Number 58, where others will have to be locally shared from elders and community members. Hopefully this isn't too challenging to kind of put this piece of the unit together, but it'll definitely take some planning to hear from those that would like to share with a group of students and what their stories are about. And this may kind of shift the learning a little bit depending on what lessons and what teachings are being focused on from the land and this area that students are looking at. The time allotted for this phase of the unit will take up to 2 weeks, with working approximately 30 minutes to an hour each day, depending on the next stage in these lessons and activities. All lessons that can take place outside should. If it is a lesson where a written story, text, or guest is sharing a story, then this could easily take place in the same location as the previous observation lessons. That way, hopefully, students can make some connections between what they were observing and what they're hearing from these stories that already exist in their community. The activity, so the end sort of goal for this portion of the unit is to have students gain knowledge of local stories about the land we are learning on and make connections to their pre-existing observations. The final product, and I think this part will take one of the 2 weeks, the second week, is students will write their own story. It can be based on a true story, or it can be somewhat imaginative based on kind of what they've learned, as long as it relates to that area, to Long Lake, and the stories that they've been told. And they will make their own story and include their written and visual observations from phase 1 of the unit. In phase 3 of the unit, the final stage for this learning from the land unit of study is for students to put everything they've learned together and create an interpretive nature sign. So their nature sign may be very informative, like this example in the image of frogs and toads. So it might even have like specific like drawings of plants or animal species, or their sign might have more of a story focus, and they've included like parts of the story that they've written during phase 2 and how the story relates to that location. Students will be given 3 to 5 approximately 1 hour sessions to work in pairs to put together all the information they have individually gathered and heard in the previous 2 phases of the unit. The final product is an interpretive nature sign, which will need permission to install. If the signs cannot be installed permanently, then this can be improvised with temporary displays. So we might not actually get to the point of installing something like this if that's not something that the school and the community wants, but we could still have some sort of way of sharing this information in an outdoor setting, and even having some guests and people from other classes to walk through and talk to the students about what they've learned and observed during the previous weeks. The end goal for this entire unit of study is to have students collect local information through observations and oral stories. With that information, students will work together to display their findings as a teaching tool for other classes to learn from. So lastly, I have the risk management issues that are included and required supervision for the outdoor portions of this unit, which is the majority of the unit. So some things that still have to be confirmed are the local risks of train, foot traffic through the area, or animals in the nearby school area. Confirm any local poisonous plants, animals, and ensure students can identify by themselves these things. Ensure that students know specific lesson boundaries. So have boundaries within this area. Once I can go there myself first before taking students and kind of see what it looks like in the forest area. That way I can make the parameters so that students aren't too far out. Have the safety measures all included for the students in this unit. So make sure that all students are aware of all of the rules, like telling an adult where they're going and like utilizing a buddy system, and to teach students about hydration, energy, dressing for different types of weather, first aid, buddy aid, all of the types of risk management issues that they can be a part of themselves. The required supervision